Hey everyone, welcome back. I am excited to have you here. So, last time I was talking about the recent Amazon scraping, which was really concerning to a lot of folks. Thanks to everyone who hopped on board and made sure that everyone knew what email to report it to have their products taken down. But this last week, we were also given some new information by Shopify on a slightly different but somewhat related topic, which is that Shopify is going to enable all Shopify websites, they're opting everybody in to this agentic AI selling, meaning that your website, it's not even just a matter of being searchable on an LLM like Claude, like DeepSeek, like ChatGPT. Now shopping will be enabled within that LLM, within that AI, and allow an AI agent, a chatbot to essentially help your consumers make decisions. But in a lot of ways, they're pitching it as these LLMs are going to be able to make decisions for your customers, or at least that's some of the language that they were using. I am paraphrasing. You're more than welcome to read their press release. And I have a lot of concerns. And obviously, this hasn't officially launched yet. It is supposed to be enabled as of January 26th on everybody's accounts. My biggest concern, if you've been following me for any length of time, if you have not, let me share with you that one of my biggest concerns when it comes to marketing, when it comes to operating a business, is consent. I'm a big fan of consent in email marketing. People have to opt into your list. You cannot opt them in. You need to have people allowing you into their inboxes. You can't make that choice for them. I'm a big fan of consumers having real choice and understanding what they are consenting to. And I'm a big fan of business owners being able to consent to anything that happens to them in their business. I think it's a really important goal and a really important idea all around. And one of my biggest red flags with this Shopify Agentic AI is that they are not starting off by giving Shopify shops a choice. They are already making that choice for you by opting you in. According to their press release, there will be a way to opt out if you want to, if you don't want to have your products being sold through a ChatGPT or a Claude. But for right now, it's just going to be part of it. And you won't necessarily have the same level of control over your messaging because now things are going to be happening in the LLMs. And my biggest concern, my biggest red flag is that if it's so great, if it's such a great idea, why not give vendors, why not give shops on Shopify the choice to opt in? Why are they making this automatic? Anytime that happens in the tech field, I have the exact same question. So this is a universal question that I always have. Like, if this is so great, shouldn't you be able to give people a choice? Shouldn't you be able to give people some sense of control? Shouldn't you be able to gain people's consent for it? So the fact that they aren't doing this actually sends up a big red flag that maybe they don't believe in this product. I actually don't know. I haven't talked to anybody there, but that's how I feel receiving this information on the other side on behalf of my clients. So that would definitely be red flag number one. My other core concern is the lack of branding yet again. So this is why this is still somewhat related to that Amazon discussion that we were having around the Amazon scraping, which is that your brand is no longer going to take center stage, right? Normally how the discovery process works, it works in a few different ways. Somebody can find your brand on a platform like Instagram. They can visually see, or if they're visually impaired, they can read your alt text, which I hope you're using. But people can get a sense of what your brand is about from the language that you use, from the visuals that you use, from your brand story. You know, people are engaging with your brand. They're developing a relationship with your brand. And you, in turn, are developing a relationship with your consumers. And when we're shifting everything to a third-party platform, you know, if all of the chat and all of the answering is going to be happening in the LLM, and the shopping too, which I'm going to get to in a moment, you know, my question is ultimately, this has also not been answered yet, is what does this look like? And I mean that visually. Like, what does this look like? Why haven't we seen mock-ups? Where is the idea? What is the idea here for how this process actually flows from the visual consumer experience standpoint? And look, I've worked in e-commerce since about 2008. I've worked in retail, customer service, and sales since about 1997. So I've had a long history of observing consumer behavior and practicing good consumer experience on websites. And my biggest concern is that this could deeply detract from any consumer experience that you've set up on your website if a lot of this relationship is managed in or by an LLM. That yeah, you might have your brand story and the LLM might be able to regurgitate it, but would it regurgitate it in a way that you would want it to? And that's where I'm having some other big red flags is how much is this going to detract from your branding? And, frankly, from a user interface standpoint, the way that the platform looks. Like I've seen what Claude looks like. I've seen what ChatGPT looks like. Frankly, both platforms from a user interface, they're fairly simple. That's fine. That's what they do. They're text-based platforms. They don't need to look fancy. They don't need to have a visually branded look. But your jewelry website really does need that. And my concern is that this might detract from all of that work that you put into your brand storytelling. All of that work that you put into your visual branding is now going to be in ChatGPT, which has a user interface that is frankly rather dull from my perspective. It doesn't have to be exciting, like I mentioned, but is that going to match your brand? And my big concern is that it might not. So, as I mentioned, part of what's going to happen here is what they call autonomous transactions, which might not sound quite as dire as it sort of sounds. Like it sounds like, oh, the robot will just be able to make a purchase for you. I believe you will still have agency within that. I don't feel like their press release actually fully defined that, though we can certainly tease out a little bit of information. And the part of that autonomous transaction that's still unclear is, do they land at the checkout page on your website, or do they land at the checkout page somehow autonomously through the LLM? Like, how is that being managed? And within that, one of my core concerns is data privacy, right? Who's going to have responsibility if somebody's putting in a credit card through the OpenAI platform ChatGPT versus your website? Who has the liability if something goes wrong with that transaction? I don't feel like I am clear on that yet. And in fact, in their press release, they did not say anything about data privacy. I looked through it. I read through it. I even did a Control F search, and I didn't find anything about data collection or data privacy, who owns what, and who is in control. And that would be yet another red flag. I think that puts up to 3 red flags, because that would be a core concern. Because if you read through your own terms and services, and those agreements, you might see in there that you are ultimately responsible, or Stripe, PayPal, etc. Like, you're responsible for using payment gateways that adhere to these data privacy rules and that protect your customers' information. And I didn't see anything about that in this press release. So that definitely adds another red flag to my list. So I'm sure you might be asking yourselves right now, well, how different is this than, say, Google Shopping or Instagram Shopping? And the truth is that we actually don't know yet, because, again, they did not spell it out. They didn't give us a visual. There was no mock-up. I looked. I did not see one. If you do see one, I'm happy to hear about it. Please drop a link in the comments. But the fact that we don't have those yet, but we do know what Instagram Shopping looks like, and we do know what Google Shopping looks like. And in both cases, they ultimately are sending people back to your website for checkout. I've gone through that process. I've seen that process, so I know what that looks like. I don't yet have a clear connection about what this is going to look like. But here is a quote from the article, from the PR press release that they sent out. The protocol supports core checkout actions: applying discount codes, selecting subscription terms, confirming final sale conditions, or handling pre-orders, all inside conversational interfaces. Whose conversational interface? I do not know. It also works with any payment processor, including Shopify payments. So again, I don't hear within this, is the checkout actually happening on your checkout page that you host on your Shopify site, or is there some connection? Is there some AI agent that's going to like shoot the payment information over? I am actually not clear. And again, they did not mention anything about security or data privacy in their press release. So I'm going to go with another red flag, which is because we don't have a visual, a picture of how all of this looks. My question is still, is this going to have people shopping on your site, experiencing your site, and scrolling through your site to see everything that you have on offer? Or is it just going to send people to the one thing that maybe they were asking the LLM about? Right? Somebody asked Claude, like, find me an engagement ring with a blue sapphire, and it's going to send up, probably a Brilliant Earth page, probably a Zales, and maybe, if they ask for indie brands, maybe they'll get to yours. But does that mean that the consumer will not see anything else that's on your site? Are they going to be able to scroll? Because the nature of the human shopping condition, and again, I've had a very long time to observe shoppers in their natural habitat, inside stores and on e-commerce sites. And people really do like it when a website has a lot of products for them to scroll through. If you've ever worked with me one-on-one, you've probably even heard me tell you, like, yeah, you actually need to beef up your site with some products because people like to see a lot of things before they make their decision. Some people, yes, they just want to see the one and then they're done and that's all they need to see. But for the most part, people like browsing, people like window shopping, people like the experience. And if all of this is happening in a conversational way in an LLM, is that really helping them do the work of getting a sense of your whole visual story and of your whole jewelry story, of your whole art story? That is another big red flag for me because I'm, again, not clear. But my assumption based on their description is that if this is happening, as they say, with conversational interfaces, is this really giving them the whole story of your brand? And I don't think that we know yet. And that's why this winds up being another red flag for me. I would also say, and this is one that I had to think about, but I would also say if this is the kind of shopping system that keeps people from scrolling on your site and interacting with your brand, I would be asking the question of myself and of my clients, what is the difference then between shopping through an LLM or shopping on Etsy? Right? If it's not going to be the same interaction with your visual brand and your visual storytelling, how does this differ from just going through Etsy and going through a million brands? And that's another part where I'm not clear what the advantage is in defining and developing a brand, and especially an indie jewelry brand that really relies deeply on storytelling. The story, yes, about the materials, but about you and your inspiration and what you want them to feel. Maybe the LLM can pull and synthesize some of that information from a site, but a lot of times an LLM is more of a text regurgitator, right? So it's not necessarily telling your story in your voice. And that would be another concern, is if it's not going to be a branded site, how is this an advantage over just selling through any third-party website? And on that front, I would also say that, again, in the press release, they said AI assistants don't browse pages the way that humans do. They synthesize information, make recommendations, and increasingly take action on the user's behalf. I have to say, this runs counter to centuries, really, of consumer behavior. Way back when I started in retail, I was also simultaneously reading this book that was written in the 1880s, The Lady's Paradise by Emile Zola. Highly recommend. It's one of my favorites. But one of the things that struck me is how it takes place in a retail establishment around 1880. And there was so much about consumer behavior that was fundamentally unchanged in over 100 years. And I was so deeply struck by that. And it actually kind of made me feel like connected to the past in a way. And it's the sense that I'm getting is that a lot of these AI agents are going to bypass literal centuries of consumer behavior. And I am not sure that that is actually good for us in the long run. And I know this is kind of like a funny comment to come from somebody who helps businesses make sales, but I'm not sure that removing agency and choice and consent from either the vendor or the purchaser of a product is really a direction that we want to go in as a society. Like, I actually have some societal level concerns about agentic AI selling. And so that would add yet another, let's call that red flag 4B, right? So for right now, I have far more questions than I have answers about this new agentic AI selling through LLMs. And I know this is a lot of, insider language. Please feel free to drop any questions in the comments about anything that I've said. But my biggest question still remains that I stated at the top. If this is so good, then why is Shopify forcing their vendors into using it rather than giving them a choice to opt in? And I think that is the biggest question that I would move forward with. Thank you so much for joining me again. Please feel free to drop your comments, whether they are positive or negative, in below, and I look forward to seeing you next time.